Most of you may know now that before I was a priest, I was a religion teacher. First at a Catholic high school for 5 years, and then at a Catholic middle school. And one of the ways I would get my kicks every once in a while would be to hear students bring up a story and pretend not to know what they were talking about so I could hear their real reaction. So I would say, are there any stories of Jesus in the Bible where he doesn't seem to be acting like himself? And they would bring up today. And they would say, do you remember, Mr. V, that time that he freaked out in the temple? And I would pretend not to remember that one. I'd say, a story, really? We'd say more about that. I don't know about that story. Yes, you do, Mr. V. Don't you remember? He lost it. He totally lost it. He started a riot in the middle of the temple. And I would say, oh, you mean that time that he confronted injustice at the temple? Because I think that's something really interesting for all of us who are encountering this story. It's easy for us, like those students, to think that if Jesus was mad, he must have been making a mistake. He must have been having a bad day. He waited too long between snacks, and he was hangry. But that is not what this is about, because this is a perfect example of anger being healthy. We know that anger is one of the 7 deadly sins, but the better translation of that would be wrath. Anger, when it's healthy, is the signal to us that we are in the presence of injustice. We are encountering something wrong. And the response when you come face to face with something that is not right is anger. And Jesus, outside of the temple that day, was coming face to face with something that was not right. The situation that Jesus was responding to was a way of looking at God that many people had in that time and many people still have today, that you actually could get to God some other way than through yourself. They had a system in that time where you would go outside of the temple and you would get your wallet out because you would go to buy some birds, some little cute birds at a kiosk. And then you would get your birds and you would bring them into the temple and you'd kill them. And then you'd come out of the temple and you'd say, I just killed a bunch of birds for God. I'm holy now. And Jesus was saying, excuse me? Is that the system that we've created to love God, to become holy? If that were true, then you could buy holiness at a kiosk. And you could walk into a holy building exactly as you are and become holy just by being there and walk out completely unchanged and call yourself holy. Jesus says, no way. That's not true. So he was angry that there was a system that could ever try to convince anyone that that was the way that God works, or that that's the way that holiness looks. And all of us actually are aware of this, because those same students who would ask me, why did Jesus lose it in the temple? They would often ask me things like this, questions that maybe you've asked yourself, or people in our community certainly have asked themselves before. Why is it that some of the holiest people I know don't go to church? And why is it that some of the people that go to church don't seem very holy? Right? That's the question. And it's back to this same issue, because holiness is not determined by something you can buy at a kiosk or something that you can attain by going in a building, no matter how holy the place is. Holiness is not found there. Holiness is an inside job. So here's how Jesus shifts the conversation. He said, this temple is beautiful, but if you tear it down, I'll raise it up in 3 days. So for those of us who are sitting in 2021, we know about Holy Thursday and Good Friday and Holy Saturday and Easter. So we know that he was speaking about something that was still to come, that was the most amazing thing that's ever happened in the history of our world. But they didn't know that. They didn't know that was going to happen. So there's actually more than one reason why Jesus said that. He's not only giving us a sense of Easter ahead of time. He is locating holiness inside, not outside. He is saying holiness, the temple of holiness, is wherever you find God's image and likeness. Holiness is an inside job. I'm the temple, he says. And by extension, that means that that's our job too. We are the temples of God. And all you need to be holy is to be made in God's image and likeness, as we all are, and to be able to make choices. And since we are all made in God's image and likeness, and since we all can make infinite number of choices every day, we can be holy. So this is why it's brilliant that on this Lenten morning, the church has paired that gospel about what holiness is really all about with the first reading, the 10 Commandments. It's very simple in that sense. We have been given instructions by God. And when we were first given them by, if you went to Catholic school, maybe it was a sister who taught you that. Maybe it was a catechist in a faith formation program. Maybe you don't feel like you ever really got to know them well. But when you sit down as a child to learn the 10 Commandments, you might say, what is covet and why can't I do it? Why can't I do that? Why can't I say God's name for fun sometimes? Why can't I? Well, and the answer to all those questions at that age is, just learn it. Just learn it. You'll understand later. And that's a fine answer, actually, because at that stage, just learn these. These are God's 10 rules. You don't need to ask why right now. That'll come later. But for all of us sitting here today, the time has come for us to now say, how am I doing at aligning my life with that design? If holiness is an inside job, if I've already got everything I need to be holy because I'm made in God's image and likeness and I can make whatever choices I want, how can I align my choices with the 10 guidelines that God gives? So how can I put God first and watch my mouth? How can I make time to pray? How can I honor my parents and my elders? How can I avoid killing people and using people? How can I not steal and not lie? How can I avoid jealousy and greed? There's the 10 things. And if I align my choices with those guidelines given to us by the Master, I'm holy. And when I say that I don't want to do that, or I don't want to think about this section of my life, I can be in a holy building, or I can buy holy things, but that's not holiness. And that is why what's happening on Wednesday is such a great opportunity. It is a chance for all of us to come for an attunement. It's a chance to say, all right, here's the 10 guidelines that God has given me, and I am having a real struggle with, and then it's all depending on who you are and what your life is like, what the struggle is. There might be a few of us here that are having a hard time with all 10. But you know what I suspect for most of us? It's 2 or 3. I'll bet you there are 2 or 3 of those 10 that are really challenging for you. 2 or 3 where you find yourself getting tripped up again and again. And that is why we keep having this sacrament of reconciliation, so that we can come exactly when we need to and be able to say, I am struggling with this one right here. And it is desecrating a part of my temple. It's going into my temple with a spray paint can, and it's spray painting on the walls of my temple, and I don't want that anymore. I want to reconsecrate my temple and recommit to this. It struck me this year when preparing for the readings today and reading that the people said, "What do you mean you could build this temple, Jesus? This temple has taken 46 years to construct." And I think the reason that hit me especially hard this year is that next month I turn 46. So my temple has been under construction for 46 years. And if my temple's like yours, every time I redesign, I get a new chapel all beautiful and I'm so proud of it. And then I turn behind me and this whole other section has like caved in. And as I look around here now, I can see there are some people whose temples have been under construction for 7 years or for 35 years. And I'm going to stop pointing now because I'm going to get in trouble. But I know that there's folks here whose temples have been under construction for 80 or 90 plus years. And it's an inside job that continues over and over. That's why the 10 Commandments are like our maintenance plan for the temple. Anybody who's ever owned a house or a boat knows this. You've got to work on it all the time. The temple always is needing to be cleaned out. It's always needing to be renovated. There's always more that needs to be done in the Holy of Holies. So this week, we are being encouraged to consider what we're going to do about this temple of ours. You know what might be an interesting thing to do for this week? Have you ever memorized the 10 Commandments? A lot of us have memorized the act of contrition, but wouldn't it be interesting for us to memorize the guidelines? No one's name is as holy as your mom's. Killing an adult is stealing life. Lying to your neighbor's wife does no good. That's my little trick to remember them. Maybe I'll do a YouTube about that so that we could work on that. That is, imagine how much better we would feel if we could have those inside of us so that we always have a place to go. Because we've been given everything we need to be holy. We're made in God's image and likeness, and we can make a million choices every day. It's up to us. Holiness is an inside job.